All right, so just waiting for it to go live. Okay, I guess we're live. So just waiting for it to hold on. Let me just. Okay. All right, there you go. I had the volume on the other on the YouTube, so I had to turn it off. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Professor Mehmet Küçüközer, and I am the chair of Hispanic Heritage Month. But I am also a professor of sociology in the Department of Behavioral Sciences at Dutchess Community College. And we have another special event tonight with our guest, filmmaker and journalist Manuel Cuéllar. So we're going to be screening a few, at least two of his documentary shorts tonight, and then opening up the floor to conversation. So if you're on YouTube, signed in on our in our YouTube page, that is Dutchess Community College's YouTube page, while you're live streaming. We ask that you ask comments or questions or post your comments in the chat, and we will get to them as we go along, watching director Manuel Cuéllar's work and having a conversation with him. So let me just briefly introduce you to Manuel Cuéllar. Manuel Cuéllar is a Colombian, New York-based filmmaker and journalist whose multidisciplinary work captures character-driven stories in the U.S. and across the Americas. So welcome, Manuel. How are you?
Hey, Mehmet, nice to be here. Very good, thank you.
Good, good. So wanted to start by asking you just a little bit about your background. How did you get into filmmaking? How did you get into journalism?
hmm
Yeah, so let us know.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Colombia. I'm from Bogota, Colombia, and I moved to the US about like 16 years ago. I was a teenager then, and I knew that I just wanted to maybe study something related to sociology or journalism. I was very visual, like all of my ideas came very visually. So it was kind of like a given that I went into photography and filmmaking. I then decided to take like a more fictional turn and study film, and because I thought that maybe fictional stories were more you could reach like bigger audiences with fictional stories because the fantasy world and so I went to study that in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I ended up. My first projects were kind of like mixing a bit fictional stories with reality, and then I kind of like stumbled upon some documentaries that I loved, and that opened like my eyes to many of the problems going on around the world, and so I was kind of like always blurring the lines between fiction and reality, and I loved that there was like sometimes you couldn't even see it, and watching the news, watching the media coverage of all the problems going on around the world, it was a bit like of a stark just reality of what how many how problems were being portrayed, and in a bad way. I was not happy with the portrayal of many issues around the world. So I started kind of like grabbing a camera and being like, okay, this is a good opportunity to mix the two techniques that I like, filmmaking and documentary. And then I started kind of like experimenting a bit with film, experimenting a bit with photography, with script writing, and that got me to move back to the States and live, start from scratch because they didn't count in any of the credits that I had done in Argentina, and that's just a different conversation on the education and the school education and how things work here. But I just started exploring more and more documentary making, and it just came naturally just to start portraying stories of the people that I was around with. So immigrants, people that pretty much didn't have opportunities, the same opportunities than other people because of their status. So that got me into the immigration theme of filmmaking, and just because of the fact that I saw how immigrants were being portrayed in the media, I thought that something was missing in that story. I thought that we were missing kind of like a big part, a big chunk of their stories, of how they got here. I mean, the media was portraying them as like, they're coming in batches. They're coming in like like using words that were associated with inhumane terms. So I just wanted to start portraying stories that were more in the humane side of things, and more so in the how did you get here? What's the how can we see, how can we portray the journey? Because sometimes it's like, oh, they're here, but it's like, what is their backstory? How do we show that journey without being as sensational as I was seeing those stories around me? So that got me to start trying out some things with the people I've met. So that's, I think, how maybe a good introduction to the first short film that we're gonna watch, which is about a mariachi singer. He's a street performer that I met here in New York, and it was just beautiful how it just came out because it was very organic. We just befriended each other, and I just followed him for a few months, and without a real script, but more like I'm just gonna shadow him. I just want to be part of his life for a couple of months and see if what will come out of this. I didn't have a story arc, I didn't have anything, but I thought just being with him and kind of like uh, having those conversations and being in the day-to-day grind that he went through, I thought it was just a good idea to just to, as a documentarian, that's really what you do. You're just trying to be a fly on the wall, as they say. So I think I that's just an introduction to the first short, and we can keep talking about how the other stories if you want.
Yeah, sounds good. I was curious. When did you come to the United States?
So it was I first came in when I was 16 years old. That was in 2008.
Hmm.
And then I decided to leave back to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, for 3 years. And then I came back to the US. That was like 2013. So that was 10 years ago.
And
And then I just haven't left since then.
was your interest in film that brought you to the United States, or what was it?
It was a mix of a lot of things. I mean, back in Argentina, I had a life, I had a job, I had pretty much everything, but the economy was not good. So I had to migrate, unfortunately, because of that. And I was able to earn a scholarship here in Florida.
Okay.
And so it was a really good opportunity to start all over again. Um, and then kind of like that was kind of like my motivation, just to start all over again, but with a clear mindset of what I wanted to do.
Okay, great. Should we hit it with the first? With
Yeah, yeah, let's hit
okay.
it. Hmm.
What's the title again of the documentary?
Title is called "The Journey of El Mariachi,"
Uh-huh.
and it's just a bit of what I was talking about. How I was trying to focus more on the journey rather than on the final destination.
Yeah.
So that's what we're gonna see right now.
Okay. Cool. Manuel, did you want me to share the screen? Because I was
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought
I
I
actually
thought you were gonna share.
no,
Sorry about that. I
I mean,
was waiting.
yeah, you can share it. I just thought you would had it ready. I'm sorry.
No worries. I thought it was gonna come through you, but I'm happy to share it via here. Just give me. Okay. So second. Okay. Hopefully, in terms of sound, you'll be able to hear this. Okay. So just tell me if you hear this, because
Sure.
I don't. Nothing?
Nothing yet. No.
Okay, so I think I need to. Right.
Vamos a Estados Unidos.
Yeah.
Me dice, vamos para allá. Usted va.
Let's start again.
I do hear it.
Vamos a Estados Unidos. Me dice, vamos para allá. Usted va a caminar mucho. 1 hora, 2 horas. Bueno, de 1 a 2 horas de camino, a los 2 días se acabó el agua. Ya no da hambre, ya no quieres caminar. ¿Quieres dormir? ¿Ves una sombrita pequeñita? Ya no importa nada. Garrafones de agua, bien. Con el deseo de agarrar, o sea, la persona que nos trajo dice, no tomen eso porque puede estar envenenado. Ponen eso para que la gente, para que se muera. Hasta qué crueldad llega esa gente, ¿no? Que son racistas, que no quieren al documentar. No solamente la gente de Estados Unidos, nuestros propios paisanos se hacen racistas inclusive también. Siendo de la misma sangre, de un país. Porque a veces hay gente blanca que es buena, gente blanca que es buena, pero de cualquier manera hay mucha gente muy mala, tristes, a toda la gente que se viene por vivir mejor con su familia. En verdad yo tenía pues muchas ganas de venirme y además no me iba mal en México. No vine cantando famoso que digamos, ¿no? Pero llegué a cantar con varios señores muy importantes, con Antonio Aguilar. En los 80s, la música mexicana, los rancheros, era muy preferida para los palenques. Había mucho trabajo. Después, bueno, pues ahorita ya contratan más música, que será más modernizada, gruperas que le llaman, o muchachas, bueno, que van muy bien presentables, tal vez no muy vestidas, ¿verdad? Entonces, el empresario gusta que la gente, los jóvenes, vayan y tengan otro tipo de presentación. Y antes no. La música con mariachi era muy bonito. Bueno, para mí. Pero bueno, los tiempos cambian. Todos los días más que por diferentes partes. Por la Roosevelt, por Alto Manhattan, todo lo que es Nueva York. Ando por todas partes. Pues cantan. Quiero seguir cantando. Esa fue mi vida, la música. Desde niño y hasta la fecha. Quiero morir cantando. Como a todos, decíamos lo mismo, ¿verdad? La música que yo canto es folclore mexicano normalmente. Pues la gente creo que sí les ha gustado. Bueno, como todo, ¿no? Muchos les gusta, otros dicen, ya no que se calle, ¿verdad? La música que yo canto no tiene fronteras. Ellos lo tienen en español, pues no he sabido entender. Yo no hablo inglés, apenas hablo el español. Pues yo me siento muy contento porque la gente es muy linda, porque ellos han aceptado la humildad con que yo les canto. Esta canción es un famoso un señor, gran cantante mexicano, Pedro Infante. No me sé el tema, pero vamos a cantar un poquito, ¿no? Dice, noche tras noche, platico con el mar, Hablamos siempre de amor, noche tras noche. Yo juego con el mar. Hablamos siempre de amor. El mar me ve llorar. Cuánto no está el mar me ve llorar. Porque soy inmensidad. Porque mi amigo el mar en mi soledad me ve llorar.
El sacrificio que hizo mi padre para traerme aquí, yo lo veo como un regalo para mí, para una nueva oportunidad. Pues a este país llegamos juntos, vivimos mucho tiempo juntos, aproximadamente 10 años, pero por motivos de trabajo mío tuve que irme de estado, entonces perdimos comunicación y esa cercanía que teníamos. Me casé y pues ahora él vive aquí solo. Al menos cada semana podemos estar en comunicación y saludarnos. Y ahora pues hoy vine a despedirme de él porque pues mañana me voy a ir por cuestiones de trabajo y por cuestiones de mi familia otra vez por otros 6 meses. Y lo volveré a ver otra vez en ese tiempo. Le doy gracias a Dios que no hemos sufrido como muchos hermanos que vienen de otros países más lejos, que ellos, claro, que tienen que pasar varias fronteras y tienen que sufrir más. Nosotros, gracias a Dios, pues estábamos en México y solamente lo único que se sufrió fue en la frontera de Estados Unidos para acá. Fue difícil, pasamos muchas cosas que no nos habían advertido. El día desde que pasamos la frontera nos empezamos a topar con muchas situaciones. Pues después se nos fueron alargando más los días. Se volvió en tercero y el tercero se volvió en cuarto ya cuando no teníamos agua ni comida. Y el último día fue lo más difícil, cuando pensaba que migración nos estaba agarrando, nos corretearon, caballos, helicópteros, motocicletas. Nos escondimos debajo de un árbol y ahí fue cuando nos dijeron que aquí pues, los que agarraban se iban a regresar a otro lugar. Yo, mi papá pues ya venía muy mal por los 4 días y fue cuando me despedí de él, que yo pensaba que él lo iban a regresar. Y pues yo, mi mentalidad como era un niño era de, ¿qué voy a hacer sin él? Estaba aquí con él, ¿qué voy a hacer yo solo allá? Eso fue lo más difícil. ¿Cuántos años tenemos? Yo tenía 16 años. 16 años.
Terrible, desesperante, es saber que mi hijo, si él se venía y pasaba como padre, se va mi hijo solo, ¿qué va a hacer allá? Y yo sin saber de él. Son momentos muy difíciles, pero a veces no queda otro remedio que, pues, que acatar lo que venga. Nos despedimos, como le dije a él, bueno, pues yo aquí me quedo, si puedes cruzar, si puedes correr, pero si tienes suerte, pasa, no te preocupes, voy a estar bien. Si migración me agarra, pues me lleva y tú échale muchas ganas, solo te digo, lleva siempre mi bendición donde quiera que estés. Fueron cosas muy desesperantes que solamente uno siente porque lo ha vivido. En ese camino, mucha gente muere. Mucha gente ya no llega a este sueño que todos se forjaron.
Se afecta mucho en el modo de no poder ya estar con él, de ese miedo constante y esa intranquilidad de las emergencias. Al saber que mi papá es una persona mayor y estando solo podrían pasar muchas cosas que yo no podré estar aquí con la rapidez que yo quisiera. Me entristece en yo tener un bebé y que él no lo ha conocido y que no lo pueda conocer pronto.
Para mí es muy importante el vernos, me llena de alegría, ver a mi hijo, de verdad. ¿Y qué puedo decir? Gracias, hijo. Gracias. Y muy pronto voy a conocer ese bebé, a ese nieto mío. Ahorita más que nada tengo cita para que vaya a finanzas, me mandaron, y quiero prevenir por el cambio de temperatura, por el frío, como 4 días que no salí, poco mal de salud. Voy a informarme a ver qué me dicen ellos. El problema es que la cita no procedió, me citaron dentro de 2 meses y así ya traigan la documentación que me van a pedir. Hay muchos enfermos, estamos saturados, algo lo que me dijeron, no hay espacio. Fíjate una cosa, casi muy poco me gusta tomar pastillas. No sé, toda mi vida casi no me checo, pero creo que ahora sí, porque unos días tuve un poquito, mucha fiebre. La garganta la siento un poquito inflamada, también me está fallando un poquito la presión. Pues la verdad sí, me hubiera gustado que me hubieran dado la oportunidad de atenderme, pero no es posible. Tendré que esperar, pero no me queda otro remedio. Siempre me gusta entrar, saludar, pues a la iglesia y vengo a pedirle a Dios, a Jesús, que nos ayude por el mundo, por tantas cosas que están sucediendo. A eso vengo, a saludarlo. Desde que tengo de razón, siempre he sido creyente. Esa fue la única herencia que mis padres me dejaron y me siento muy orgulloso de ser creyente porque es mi raíz. La Virgen María de Guadalupe, la mamá de nuestro Jesús, para mí y para muchos también, representa tantas cosas bellas. La persona, la compañera que fue, ya no está. Pero quiero llegar a encontrarla a ella, allá en México, visitar su casa. Desde el cielo una hermosa mañana, desde el cielo una hermosa mañana, la Guadalupe. La Guadalupana, la Guadalupana, bajo el tepeya. Este cerro elijo, oh, este cerro elijo, para ser mi altar. Desde entonces para el mexicano, desde entonces para el mexicano, ser guadalupano, ser guadalupano, ser guadalupano es algo esencial.
Fascinating. So I have so far one comment so far from Foxy Tulip, who I know is Jen Ramirez, student of mine. Says very cool intro logo. That's her comment.
Amazing.
How did you meet him?
Yeah, I was at a restaurant in Harlem having lunch, and he just came in and played some music for the restaurant,
Mm.
and I just loved what he played, and I just pulled up and talked to him, and we kind of like started like a relationship little by little. We met again. I told him about a potential project I wanted to do about immigration and about this journey, and but it just became so organically. He was always like he was mostly interested in being friends more than being the character of a film. So yeah, it was very organic, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, the story certainly, he's traveling with his son, and they're forced to sort of separate once they just cross the border, correct? From
That was the fear they had, but at the end they pulled through that kind of like weak moment, and they ended up coming together and entering the country together, and then they just had to separate because of work, because of many things. He ended up they first went to Florida, but his dream was always to be a mariachi singer. He was doing that in Mexico, and now he wanted to do it in the Big Apple in New York. So that was like a dream he had. So he wanted to pursue that, and that's where he decided to kind of like migrate within the country to New York and start all over here. And he loved it, even though it was a hustle. He loved the people he met. He loved sharing music, sharing his traditions, sharing mariachi music. So that's kind of like how it happened. Yeah.
Really interesting. I have another comment here from Nick Craig. My mother would like to know if you know at all how Efren's son is recently. I can't read the whole thing here. Um, Hold on, let me try to see if I can enlarge this because I think it's getting cut off. So my mother would like to know if you know at all how Efren's son is recently. Yeah, and then it gets cut off. I don't think Nick, I don't think you finished your thought. So if you want to write that question, I can respond. I think you cut off the words there, so it's not, you didn't write the whole thing. So Nick, please write it again so I can make sense of what you wrote and ask our Manuel. Thank you. It seemed to me also it's like how music, I mean, obviously there's a sense of a profound loneliness of Efren, the
Yeah.
musician living in New York, getting by, playing his music. But it seemed like the music played a very powerful role in sustaining him, through that loneliness emotionally, in his existence in New York. Would that be fair to say from your
Oh,
experience?
definitely. Yeah, no, that was something that he and I actually, to follow up on Nick's comment, maybe he was wondering how they're doing right now.
Yes,
Um,
he posted again. Yeah, you're asking how the father and son are doing presently.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I kept in communication with a friend. Unfortunately, he had to migrate back to Mexico when the pandemic hit, because it was just so risky for somebody at his age to be by himself. He lived in Brooklyn. He lived by himself, he shared a house, but it was a very lonely life. And his family was kind of like imploring him to come back, and he was always kind of like against that, because he was always trying to fulfill his dream. He had a big family, he had grandkids, and he had many kids. But at the end of the day, he was like, music is my medicine. Music is what is keeping me alive. So that was always his dream. And when I talk to him now that he's in Mexico, he's happy to be back with his family, but he also misses New York so much. You know, he's like, I would love to just go out and play for anybody.
Right.
Music has been, it's in his own words, music is his medicine for sure.
Yeah, he's a fascinating character. I mean, you know, that dream. I was also thinking about, you know, how, you know, so many stories of people sort of following a dream are here. They may be undocumented, but in following the dream, you know, they're contributing something to the life of the city, right? I mean, they're providing, you know, they're sharing their traditions, they're sharing their arts, they're sharing their beliefs, they're sharing, you know, what they're passionate about. It just seems like, you know, is in part what makes New York such a fascinating place, but also what a rich culture, such a rich place culturally, you know, and
Yep.
socially. Um, and for many people like myself, it's one of the reasons I have such a hard time, you know, for me to leave New York City as
Yeah.
well. You know, and I work in Poughkeepsie, you know, I thought about moving, you know, because for me the commute is killing me slowly, but but it's the cultural life, you know, and I'm into music as well, and the cultural life in New York City, and it's hard for me to leave that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it could be it's your lifesaver, and it's what it's so rich. New York is so rich with music, with culture, and with many different, you know, music from different backgrounds. But at the same time, it's very hard to be a musician in New York, especially for traditional music, right? And you know more than, you know, with son jarocho. Um, with for a friend, it was really hard as well with being a mariachi singer from the old days. You know, that, like he said, it's like people now want to be entertained. They want maybe the spectacle. You know, he was kind of like battling with that as well. It was a bit of a romanticization of the life of an artist that we would love to see, you know, grow and be, and we would love to see evolve here in New York. But sadly, it's getting expensive, and musicians are not getting paid as they should. Traditional music is not being appreciated as it should. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You know, it's like it could be really good, but it could also be really harsh on them, because it's also a very lonely city. If you're as an undocumented immigrant, it can become a very lonely city. And he is also an elder undocumented immigrant. He's when I shot this, he was 73
Wow.
years old, and you cannot tell because he looks so good. He's
Yes,
like
he looks
so,
so young. I mean,
so young. But that day in the hospital, I could really tell that something was going on with him, because he, like he said, he's like, I never take medicine, I never come to the hospital, but this is like really rough. And you could sense, and I could see through him, and I could really sense like his age, and like he was like slowly, little by little, kind of like feeling the pain of being by himself at that age.
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So how old was he when he arrived to the U.S.?
He was 60 years old, and his son was 16. His youngest son. So that's why the travel through the desert was so hard for him, because he was already a 60-year-old man, and you know, it was really rough. They were in the desert for 10 days. And that was also something that I wanted to portray, not in a sensational way, but also how do we show that more than just with words. And that's why I decided to illustrate that part of the short film, you know, with kind of like illustrations that portray a bit of what was going on, and reenact it, but not dramatically, but just like how they were
Right.
like remembering it.
Yeah, interesting. Is the son still here in the United States?
Yeah, the son is still here. He's in Florida, and he has a life there, and he
Right, he's married, he has a
has a
child.
son, and he has a child. Yeah. Hmm.
And just it's important to point out how many people who are undocumented have long lives here. They have families, they have children, they have established lives. You know, and then the sort of, I think, the anti-immigrant rhetoric about, you know, going after people. You're talking about people who have families, who have established lives, have contributed much, you know, work, you know, become productive people in the United States. And I think statistically, I think more than half are people who have been in the United States by 10 years or more. Uh, of undocumented immigrants and have families. So simply uprooting them and this focus on deportation, that is a very complex question, and I think has significant human rights implications because we're talking about people with families, long established roots, working members of their communities.
Mhm.
I think that really complicates the sort of the anti-immigrant sort of outlook, as some kind of solution to whatever problem they perceive in the United States. It's important to point out, what we know statistically about immigrants in the United States, right? Many
Yeah.
and have been.
Totally. And to the point of going back to the point of like elderly undocumented immigrants, I did some of reporting on that last year, and I followed up with a friend and with other elder undocumented immigrants, and it's crazy how most of them, even though they've been here for 10, 20, 30 years, they're thinking about going back to their countries, even though it might be it's the risk was always not to come back to the US. So it's just so interesting that they, even though they raised a family here and they have a life here, they're deciding to go back because they don't have they don't have a saving account, they don't have a, they have 401k. So even though they contributed so much to the economy of this country, they are going back to their countries to pass away. Yeah, to finish their lives in their countries.
Because they couldn't retire here.
Yep.
Which is also a major challenge for people who are not undocumented to be able to retire with security in the United States. 401ks, maybe this is a tangent, but that, does not provide financial security for most Americans.
Yep.
So the challenge for undocumented people is even stronger, right? So yeah, thank you. And it was interesting to see he was like everywhere he went, he was with his guitar always. In the film, pretty much the only time he wasn't with his guitar is when he was sick and going to the clinic, but otherwise he was always with his guitar.
It's an extension of his body,
It
and
was exactly
so special, and he illuminated everywhere he went. People were like, as he said, like, I don't even speak English, I can't even speak Spanish well, but like I entertain people and I connect with people, and he was always pointing that out, how people in New York really treated him as he was one of them, and he always felt welcomed. So that was really beautiful to hear. And music, I'm also a bit of a musician, so it was interesting to tackle the project through music, use music as an extension of himself, as an extension of the project, not just telling a friend's story, but like what is, he carries a tradition with him. He carries so many people that came before him. So that was very interesting to portray it through music. It helped a lot just to tell his story.
Well, yeah, and I think it also reinforces the idea of how music, really does break down barriers, right? Music breaks down barriers, opens up doors, it brings people together. It's still the reality of the starving artist. I think that's also comes out here, the struggle of the artist. Musicians are exploited, artists are often exploited, right? We value it, but at the same time, we don't want to, support musicians who provide so much to their communities, which is
Definitely. So hopefully projects like this will get people to support their traditional music, their local musicians and immigrant musicians, like just in general, because we live in a city so rich with culture and with entertainment that it's really hard for most of them. So it's just a piece of this like big scheme, this big puzzle.
Yeah. And so it's like the one companion he had is music that's sustaining him. It was fascinating to see that. Really good, really enjoyed that. Thank you, Manuel. So far, no other new questions. Okay, so maybe we want to go on to your next short.
Of course.
Okay, yeah. So let's hit it. Then, what's the title of the next short that you want to present?
Okay. So the next short is around the kind of like keeping that theme of immigration and the fact of the journey of migrating. So I was doing a project for my master's degree on how there was this pill called PrEP, that is a pill that helps prevent HIV, helps you prevent contracting HIV, and we found out that the pill was apparently free for New Yorkers, but many Hispanic and Latino communities were not getting the pill because those were the communities that were getting most infected. And then so we kind of like started to investigate why was that, and that got us to an organization called that got us to like a person that was part of an organization, and we met her. She used to work as a sex worker, and then getting those services from this organization, and then she ended up working for the organization herself. So she went from getting the resources to providing those resources. So she was an amazing character, and the short film is called Geraldine, which is her name, and Between Fantasy and Reality. And you'll see why it's called fantasy. That's like her stage name. So Between Fantasy and Reality. And I'll just play it and we can talk about it if you want afterwards.
Okay. So I did get another question here from Foxy Tulip, who did ask, did doing this documentary affect your journalistic process at all? Your journalistic work?
Interesting. I don't think so. I think it expanded it. If I had to say something about it, I mean, it expanded it because I could see how I was able to use different multimedia, I mean, different ways to tell a story, not just reporting on it, because sometimes in journalism, there's a term called parachute journalism, that you just go into communities, you report on the problem, and then you go back, you publish it, and then you never go back to those communities, you never follow up. So I guess projects like this, it takes longer, of course. It took 6 months. I was like, every season I was with him. But I think it just opened new doors of like how I was able to portray these stories in a different way, through illustration, through music, through visual, like different visual ways, video, and I think yeah, it definitely expanded how I wanted to start telling the stories, not just by the tip of the iceberg, but just like, let's see what's under it all.
And you did you do the illustrations yourself?
Oh, it was actually my sister. She's a graphic designer. So I had a lot of people collaborating. My friend who's a graphic artist, he did the logo. I had musicians who composed tracks for the piggies. It was a bit collaborative, but it all came together.
Documentary work usually is, right? I mean, it usually is very collaborative, right? Good. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Yes. So I'll just play it, and thank you for the questions. Is the audio all right for you guys?
The audio wasn't great. I mean, it was coming through, but it wasn't great. I don't know the reason for that. Is it maybe the internet connection?
Maybe I'll just lose my camera while we play it. Maybe it'll probably make it a bit better, hopefully.
You want me? I can also close my camera too, if that would make it better.
Yeah, maybe we will have a better connection.
Okay.
Great. All right.
Disculpa el nervio, pero yo quería cantar aquello del profe que dice ¡Director! Y me acordé que traigo el billete. Mira qué poesía. Y es real, traigo el billete. Me soltaron los aires, pero aún no estoy liberada. Me toca mal. Estas son las barreras de protección sexual. Tenemos eventos para que la gente venga a recibir sus incentivos, las barreras sexuales, la información para que sepan de qué manera pueden evitar los contagios y también para darles información con respecto al PrEP y todo lo que significa barreras sexuales y cuidado personal. Pueden venir, se les entregan ya sea en paquetes pequeños o bolsas más grandes, dependiendo de la necesidad del cliente.
Geraldine, desde hace muchos años ella ha sentido cómoda y segura con nosotros y recibió capacitación. Ella fue como que creando más seguridad en ella misma. A veces hasta despierta una pasión por, digamos, convertirse en una proveedora. Y eso es lo que pasó con ella, que ella ya estaba preparada para entrar en el campo de prevención, y qué mejor que una organización que es hecha para la comunidad trans, que es manejada por la comunidad trans y que aquí celebramos nuestra identidad como inmigrantes que somos, y en este trabajo necesitamos gente como ella.
Pues mira, yo creo que lo más importante es que cada quien tiene signo de representación, ¿no? Se me hace muy exquisito el color azul con el rosa en combinación a lo que pudiera considerarse nuestra dualidad, nuestra sensibilidad. Me gusta mucho. Me gusta mucho. Creo que está muy bien representado. Yo crecí en Santa Úrsula, Coapa, en la Ciudad de México.
¿Qué te acuerdas de creciendo ahí?
Pues mira que me acuerdo de todo. El detalle es que para mí Santa Úrsula, Coapa es mi infierno en la tierra, ¿no? Yo me acuerdo, de verdad, siempre jugando con muñecas, siempre siendo niña. Me encantaba esto, porque ahí me sentía plena, ¿me explico? Esta es la etapa donde iban a empezar los abusos sexuales por parte de mis familiares. Por eso mucho tiempo renuncié al sexo. Cuando yo tuve mi crecimiento espiritual, cuando descubrí el maravilloso ser humano que soy, porque estoy simplemente concebida por mí misma como amor. Sí dejé bien claro en algún momento de mi adultez, tú, le dije a mis 5 violadores, están perdonados, pero no está olvidado, está trascendido, pero no está corregido. Ustedes me tocan a uno de los y no permito que vivan para contar. Refiriéndome a mis sobrinos, ¿no? Porque para mí mis sobrinos son mis hijos. Él es Gerardito, es mi niño hermoso, precioso. La madrugada que tuve que dejar todo atrás fue muy difícil para mí, darle un beso en la frente y no poderme despedir de él. Platicando con un cliente de la estética, en algún momento yo dije, a mí me sigue hostigando y yo meto una demanda. Ni se te ocurra, porque ya sabes que aquí todo se sabe. Este individuo está padrinado por un alto mando policial, entonces ni se te va a ocurrir querer ponerle el dedo, porque la que va a salir perdiendo eres tú. Y aparte,
Sorry about that. 1 second.
en México, pues a nosotras nos matan y no pasamos de ser hombres vestidos de mujer. La trágica noche de mediados de octubre del 2019, en la que ya fue inevitable estar frente a él, este delincuente, porque se obsesionó conmigo. Me dijo, ¿sabes qué, hija de tu tal por cual? No eres para mí, no eres para nadie. Me toma por el cuello, ultraja a mi cuerpo. Cuando escuchas ese clic de que accionó el arma y no detonó, el instinto de supervivencia. Corrí. Dije Tijuana. Yo me voy a Tijuana. Si este individuo me sigue, yo me cruzo el desierto. O sea, yo tuve que aprender lo que es migración, lo que es petición de asilo sobre la marcha, porque yo vivía en mi mundo. Fue mes y medio en Tijuana, en aquel lugar. Después cociné para las 20 y tantas personas que ahí vivíamos porque se me dio el servicio de cocina. Fuimos un grupo de 15 personas a las que recibieron los agentes de migración en la línea. Nos entregamos con ellos y nos metieron por debajo a la famosa hielera. Al ser una persona trans, la única de ese momento, me aislaron de hombres y mujeres completamente heladas. Realmente el término hielera se queda corto. En aquel momento, en un tono bajo, interpreté la canción de Paloma Negra. Empecé, ya me cansé de llorar y no amanece. Ya no sé. Y estaba llorando y llorando. Y el Señor dijo, gracias, no sé quién eres, pero gracias. Yo escuchaba las cadenas de todos los detenidos que ingresaban y para no sentirme tan mal conmigo misma dije, ok, voy a vivir mi momento. Geraldine Cleopatra, escucha cómo llevan los esclavos con sus cadenas y dice un mundo de fantasía, que ese es mi nombre de artístico, fantasía. Me llevaron a Otay Mesa, California, y cuando descubro que el lugar era un centro de detención varonil, dije, ¿qué hago yo? Y a las 12 del día, como escena de película, entro y me quedé, porque todos voltearon a verme, yo con mis cobijas en la mano, y fue un chifladero, y gritaban, va. Todos voltearon a verme, yo con mis cobijas en la mano, y fue un chifladero, y gritaban, vaselina, vaselina. Yo dije, ¿en qué estoy metida? Peleé porque se me diera la oportunidad de cortar cabello, porque allá adentro te dan la oportunidad de trabajar en lo que puedas hacer, pagándote $1 al día por tu desempeño laboral. Me dieron la estelar, aun cuando había 4 peluqueros que se enojaron cuando a mí me dieron la estelar, de 9 de la mañana a 2 de la tarde cortando cabello a todos los que quisieran. 4 meses, pero yo ya me había mecanizado para, pues dije, pues ya que él tiene 3 años, que me esté mucho. Te dejan saber que cualquier movimiento, cualquier situación.
Sorry about that. I don't know.
Do you want me to share it from I mean, from my connection? Would that be easier?
Yeah, it might. I don't. Let's try one more time, one last time. Seems that it's loading now.
O error que tú cometas directamente se va a lo que es tu historial cuando determinen en tu última audiencia si te dan el beneficio del asilo político. Entonces todavía no lo tengo. Mi última corte es para septiembre del año en curso y espero y confío en el universo que todos los pasos que he dado hasta ahorita sean correctos.
Geraldine ahora es una de las proveedoras de aquí de la organización y eso como que motiva a otras chicas a decir, es posible, yo no tengo que quedarme todo el tiempo como una persona que recibe servicios, yo puedo ser la persona que da los servicios a la comunidad.
Trabajar con Geraldine es una experiencia súper cool. Ella es una persona de mente abierta, tiene muchas perspectivas.
She has always been extremely dedicated to her work, always very punctual, very motivated, a self-starter. So she always takes initiative, and it's been an honor, really, to work with her.
como personaje, yo decía, yo no quiero tener un nombre de mujer como personaje. ¿Qué puedo hacer? Ya cuando escudriñé dije, pues fantasía, porque mi eslogan es, tus ojos no creerán lo que tus oídos están escuchando. Acuérdate que soy mexicana y mi mente toda trabaja en doble sentido. Mira a mi abuelita. Le digo, abuelita, usted consigue que de una madrecita como usted exista una madresota como yo. A México espero no regresar por diferentes circunstancias. Lo único que me queda es por seguir demostrándole al mundo que como ser humano, y siempre lo he dicho, soy tan digna de amar y ser amada como cualquier otra persona. Eso sería lo más importante. Mi experiencia con la organización es muy grata y quiero seguir creciendo. Sentirme orgullosa de mí misma. Lucha, perseverancia y constancia te llevan a donde tú quieres llegar. Yo pienso que tengo en PrEP, porque el año pasado me resulta de suma importancia seguir propagando la información del PrEP y al PEP.
Oh my God. We're almost there.
Yes, well, a little bit more, yeah.
Y tengan en cuenta que es para erradicar, para evitar nuevos contagios. O sea, no nada más es el uso del condón, es realmente comprometerte contigo mismo, pues a cuidar tu integridad física y a cuidarla de quienes te rodean. Porque mucho tiempo era comprender todo este bello sentimiento que llevo tan dentro de mí, para poderle demostrar que lo que yo le ofrezco es algo más que simplemente pasión. Y si tú eres el afortunado, sabrás que te entrego el alma, la vida y mi corazón. Porque una persona que me arrulle entre tus brazos, a quien contarle de mis triunfos y fracasos, que me quite de sufrir.
Okay. I'm very sorry about the connection. I wasn't expecting that. I know that it kills the vibe a bit.
Yeah, it's just a little hard to follow, but I mean, I think we got the sense of it. But a really interesting character. Now, was that taking place here in New York? I wasn't sure. Yeah,
Yeah, it was all here. Trans Latina Network is an organization here in New York.
in New York. Okay, and where are they located?
They're located in Manhattan. Yeah, Lower East Side.
Okay.
Yep.
And so yeah, and so they're. I mean, I see what she's doing. I mean, it's fascinating that clearly my sense that she's a survivor. I mean, of course, what she has gone through, and uh, did they give her asylum to in the United States?
Oh, not yet. The case, though, that takes such a long time, and actually, it was very interesting to get a call from her lawyer a few months after the documentary was done. For them, she was asking that if they could use this documentary for, for her case, like, and so that she could be able to prove kind of like her character, that in asylum cases they wanna see as many testimonies from people and documentation as possible that the person is kind of like a good citizen, so they wanted to use the documentary, and I was very pleased to share it and for them to be able to use it. But I think the case is ongoing, and it usually takes years.
Right. Just for our audience, in case, because an asylum seeker is a different legal status compared to other types of sort of people who come to the country undocumented or otherwise, right? It's a particular type of legal status, and right now what we see with many immigrants arriving to New York, this the crisis, quote unquote crisis right now that we have of an immigrant crisis, are people who are seeking asylum in the United States, claiming that conditions that are dangerous back home, from where they originate from? Are there reasons that are forcing them to leave? Threats to their lives and to their security? And they have a legal right. People who suffer from threats to their lives or security in one place have a legal right to seek shelter or safety in another country by asking for asylum. So we have many people coming to the border today because of conditions of their countries of origin where they live, and they're seeking asylum, shelter, and protection because they're arguing, or they're trying to make the case that their lives are under threat in the places where they're from. And in the case here, we're seeing that in her case, she was the brutal victim of and survivor of sexual violence in Mexico City, which forced her and pushed her to leave, right? And
Yeah, yeah, and she was the violence she went through as a kid. She shared those stories, and it's almost like she was carrying that with her, of course. And she was a survivor as a kid, and then she had, you know, death threats from this person, and that's why she feared for her life, and she had to escape. She had to seek refuge in the United States, and then the journey was even worse, right? Because then she tells about the conditions in immigration detention centers, not, you know, being a trans woman, not being able to be in one or the other, or they put her with all the men, and like all the harassment also there. So definitely a tough journey, even while she was seeking asylum.
right. And of course, the conditions, the cold, the severe cold in the prison, it's like a prison-like environment, I guess. They don't typically call them a prison, but they actually, historically, they've taken old prisons and converted them into detention centers. So in effect, they are prisons. You know, so it's important to note, you know, what these detention centers are. They in effect are former prisons turned into detention centers.
Yep.
Also, just a note, because of the current politics around these many asylum seekers that are coming to New York City right now, many people confuse them as illegal, quote unquote, illegal immigrants. They're not illegal immigrants. It's a different type of legal status. But a lot of the pushback against the arrival of many of these asylum seekers are they're called illegal immigrants. They're not. And so they have a legal right to have their cases heard in the United States. Of course, we have a backlog of cases because we don't invest a lot of money in you know, in the legal process here. So we have few judges and a backlog of cases, and they have a legal right to be here while they're waiting for their case to be heard, right? I think a lot of people don't quite understand that about asylum seekers here in the United States, around the politics around these issues, right? They confuse that with being, quote unquote, an illegal immigrant, right? And so they have no right to be here, and therefore calling them illegals, you know, they push for having them immediately, you know, deported.
Yeah.
They have a legal right to be here, and they have a legal right to have their cases heard. So it's important to emphasize the legal distinctions of different types of people who arrive to the United States and what rights they have according to the law, right? And so,
Yeah, and it's not as easy as people also assume that for them to stay here. I mean, when you're in a detention center or in a prison, in prison, pretty much, I've been to immigration courts, and it's startling. Like it's very inhumane how they're also treated like one by one. In the pandemic, it was worse because now it was not in person, and they would have a chance to like defend themselves. It was worse because then they had to do it via Zoom, and most of them, I mean, they don't understand English. So yes, there's a Spanish translator, but the translation was not that good. So I couldn't even understand sometimes what the Spanish translator was saying. And some of them didn't even speak Spanish. They spoke in their native indigenous languages. So there's, you know, they're even like, they don't even know what the judge is saying, and all of a sudden their fate is on the line, and they could be deported the next day.
yeah, and the
So
other thing is they don't have a legal right to a lawyer often, right? That's another issue when it comes to immigration issues. There is no legal right to a lawyer, and especially in deportation cases. So that's another challenge for many people seeking the right to stay here, right? And who are defending their cases. So there are many obstacles in presenting their cases.
Yep.
It's important to emphasize that. And often there are people who don't have the legal right to work while they're waiting for their cases to be heard. So the struggle then is to survive economically in a place, you know, in a place that don't give you the legal right to work as well. even though you have the legal right to stay, but the legal right to work you don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
Which is another major challenge.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about this character here is that she, as a survivor, I mean, has turned that into a life mission of helping others. I mean, clearly, right? I mean, she's focused on educating people around, on prevention of diseases. She's focused on, giving people the medical help they need, and as well as her other passion, which is, I guess, music and singing, right?
That was amazing to see her coming out in that character, because she's been using that character called fantasy to create her own world out of this like terrible past that she had, and it's worked so great for her, because she not only inspires other, but she's like, it motivates her to keep going. And when she's in that character, she just illuminates the place, and her voice is amazing. She has an amazing reach, an amazing voice, and so that's also her passion. But it was also a way to use music to tell her story, right? Because she it's almost like having a double life. In one life you're suffering, you're kind of like as an immigrant, and then this other life you're kind of like, okay, I'm gonna be the entertainer now, and then I'm gonna illuminate, I'm gonna tell the story that I want to tell, the life that I want to live. And it's very inspiring, because even though she's been through so much, I mean, and we just touched the surface, she just it just goes to show how, art and music and the expression of like how of this, of how she's able to portray her pain, um and how she's able to just just kind of like sing her pain away, I guess.
But I mean, it's another story of another person who arrives here and is contributing so much
Yeah.
to New York, to the life of so many people in this country, right? Struggling and fighting to make New York, not only, of course, New York, a better place for for many people, right? I mean, when we think about immigrants, I mean, so many stories are like this, right? That there are people who are struggling and in the process contributing so much to the lives of their communities where they live, working to help other people. It's important that, because the rhetoric is always so much about dehumanization, that they're a threat. And, what we see here are stories of people who are, are just as human as anybody else, right? But not only that, are contributing to their communities with their art, but also with their passion to help others. It's a powerful story and a reminder, again, how sometimes a demonizing rhetoric can really be damaging, right? I mean,
Yep.
in a moment of fear, that it's the politics of fear that are often used towards people who are undocumented, towards immigrants. It's a reminder of that, I think, and a powerful reminder of that too.
And also kind of like the narrative of again, New York being the place of where amazing things happen and we're helping each other so much, but we found out that in New York, Latino communities were not being able to access the so-called free pill, the so-called pill that it was accessible to all. So it was just a way to show how the city was not doing their job correctly. They were not reaching their communities because it's a bit antiquated, because the publicity, they just maybe translate the publicity and they think that's going to reach Latino communities, as we've seen many times. It's just translate it and then we will reach it. But it's like, our communities are so complex, and they're made out of so many rich cultures within it. So it was very
People speak
interesting
indigenous languages, not Spanish as well, right? That's another reality.
and there's a different way to reach us, and there's a different way to be familiar with us, and it's very interesting to so we kind of like made a flyer that was meant to reach like audiences and reach like Latino audiences, and then we met Geraldine, we met Trans Latina, and then it was like a good way to segue into how they were actually making the work for the city. They were the ones reaching those communities, and they were actually the ones that were leading that battle against HIV prevention in Latino communities. And Geraldine was kind of like the one spearheading, or at least, working with the community to make that happen.
Was there also an issue about, making these medicines accessible to undocumented people? Was that also an issue that prevented? Because sometimes, when it comes to social services and providing help, there's an effort not to make it available to people who are undocumented, and so I'm wondering if that had something to do with it.
Yeah, I guess with the city, it is harder, because there's other communities that have status and have a medical insurance, and they go to their doctors, and their doctors tell them, hey, there's this pill that you can take. So it's accessible for them, but for undocumented communities, as we know, they don't have the same access. They don't have medical insurance. The New York does have a lot of, it does have accessible health plans for undocumented immigrants, and that has been improving through time. But again, this is like a community it's a minority within the minority, right? So it's even harder for people that are looking for HIV prevention through this pill when they don't even have the basic access. So it's definitely harder, and that's why it's so important that organizations like Trans-Latina Network exist, because they don't, it doesn't matter if you have a status or not. For them, it's for everybody.
I think also in this her story also intrigued me, that she created this sort of alter ego as an artist, right? As a singer. What was her name? Fantasies? Is that the name?
Yeah, Fantasy.
I wonder if that, was a product in many ways of going through so many difficulties and challenges and struggles, where you start to, dissociate from the reality of the horrible reality that you're living. And then by dissociating, it's a self-defense mechanism of survival, right? So it maybe is a way of creating this alter ego, was a way to survive those conditions that, she found herself that were really, traumatic at the moment, right? I'm just wondering, is that what maybe led to her artistic alter ego of fantasy?
Yeah, that's something that she would say, like how fantasia or fantasy was her way to live a life that she never had, to just be this queen, this in her kingdom. And even when she was detained and in the immigration center, maybe we didn't catch that because it was buffering, but she talked about how listening to the chains of the migrants being walked into the detention centers, she would start imagining things, and she would pretend that she was Cleopatra, and then they were like all this servants coming in, and then she was like, and she started singing, and she created her own kingdom even within the prison cell.
It's a self-defense mechanism of survival.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think is another important point, and this is something that comes up, I think, is this idea, the reality of sex work, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a tendency to moralize, sex work, and then to talk about it obviously as something horrible. We want to eliminate it and so on. But many people, when they engage in that discourse, they forget, they do not address the realities that push people into sex work. As a means of survival for marginalized populations, right? Who have really a very little other options in their world to get by, right? You can't tackle this question of sex work without really tackling the realities and the conditions in which so many marginalized populations live. And so, and what they end up doing in their moralistic discourse about sex work is that they end up stigmatizing the people who are sex workers,
Yep.
right? And that gives also excuse for police to be, to treat them horribly. Yeah, and I think we need to have a more complex, um, look or understanding about the realities of sex work, so that we have a more humane policy or approach to questions of sex work.
I totally agree, and it's people tend to stigmatize the sex worker, but not the person that is seeking for that sex work. It's like there's demand. So if there's demand, there's going to be people that have the needs and that just fall into that category. and they do it without shame because it's also a means to get by. But we need to tackle the system in place that push them to those circumstances, and then the system that pushed people to seek for that demand, because there's demand. So if it's almost like with drugs, with cocaine, it's always, the big thing is always blaming the countries down south, Colombia, Peru, but the demand is still here. The demand is in the US, the demand is in Europe, the demand is in Spain. So it's always like, who are we pointing fingers at, and then how do we tackle the issue in a more systemic way, right? This and sex working it's some countries have legalized it, like in the Netherlands, and at least you can have a more humane way of working because they're not in the shadows of society, but they at least have protection. They at least are not risking their lives for a day job, for a night job. So I just think the conversation needs to happen, but we need to look at the problem differently for sure.
And in recent years, there's been more of a push for that, but I think I don't know. I mean, that's another conversation for another day. But an interesting one. I think the documentary brings that up. I think clearly to think about that more. So good work on that, certainly. So again, a powerful story. Both characters, what they show us about the reality of immigrants and the immigrant experience. Certainly, it's varied. It's very complex. But they're very human stories, right? The conversation should not be about fear. It should not be about demonization. It should be understanding the great variety of experiences of immigrants here, and the reality of the fact that they are here, and what they contribute, how they impact all of our lives in many ways. But the conversation should not be sensationalistic. Your work is definitely trying not to be sensationalistic about it, but very matter of fact about the reality of it. And I think that's important approach to it, because so often the stories are so sensationalized, either romanticized or a language of fear and demonization often, right?
And let them tell it in their own words.
Yeah,
because we usually tend to speak for them in the media, in movies, and all these fictional characters. As you said, the romanticization of the Latino experience. There's a romanticization. There's like the sad mother, or the hero, the villain. It's always we fall into in these categories, and I think when we let these stories, like, let them speak out, let them tell their own stories, let us get into those script writing, the movies, and like let us get more jobs in media, and let us just be mindful that these are communities that are so rich but are so multi dimensional. It's not just one dimensional. It's so rich that it's gonna still happen. It's gonna keep happening. More stories like this should keep popping up, and but until we don't hear it from their own words, we're not gonna understand the issues that they're facing.
Yeah, I mean, it's multidimensional because they're very human, right? I mean, human beings are multidimensional, right? Just to start with that. But also, and often the stories about the immigrants who are hardworking, but that reduces them only as people who labor, as laborers, as if they have no other sides, dimensions to themselves, right? And I don't want to talk about immigrants as always, I think that's damaging to always talk about them as laborers who are just going to work hard, and that's what they are, as, machines, essentially, right? Just accepting of being exploited on top of that. Right. I think we need to talk about them as fully human in all their dimensions, as like we want ourselves to be presented, right?
And we want to see those stories of migrant stories being vulnerable, men being weak, women being strong. I mean, the whole just being able to just be humane, be humane, of tackle these stories as with the vulnerability of that we have. And I think that we need more of that for sure, and break the stereotypes that are really like affecting us to move on, because these stereotypes are like like you said, you know, you end up accepting exploitation. You end up accepting works that are not a job that is like inhumane because of that, because you're the hardworking immigrant and you have one chance in this country, and if you don't make it with the job, then you're out, and then that benefits kind of like the narrative of that type of like of the migrant experience.
So thank you again, Manuel Cuéllar, our guest tonight. He's a filmmaker from Colombia originally. He now lives in New York, is doing his work here as a filmmaker journalist. Again, thank you for the powerful stories in your documentaries. We look forward to certainly seeing more of your work. Hopefully in the future you can, as you make more documentaries, you might come back and share more with us. We would love to have you again. And so thank you. Gracias a todos por estar con nosotros esta noche. And I just want to mention the upcoming events for next week. Tuesday, October 17th for Hispanic Heritage Month at Dutchess Community College. There'll be a live musical performance by the group Caña Dulce, Caña Brava. They are from Mexico. And they will be presenting folk music, Mexican folk music from the Gulf of Mexico, called Son Jarocho music. And their presentation will be from 7 in the evening to about 8:15 in the evening in Conklin Hall Atrium, our residence hall. So hopefully you can make it. The performance will be great. I've seen them live. They're incredible performers, incredible group. They bring a distinctly feminine voice to Son Jarocho music. So really sort of a new wrinkle to this age-old genre. So please check that out. I promise it will be very worthwhile. Next Tuesday, October 17th, 7 to 8:15. And then next Thursday, October 19th, Janice Astor del Valle will be reading some of her. She's a playwright, actor, and writer, of course, and will be reading some of selections from her work. And then in reading her work, we also open the floor up to conversation. And not only is she an award-winning playwright and actor, but also she's an assistant professor of the practice of arts management and entrepreneurship at SUNY Purchase. So she's a SUNY colleague as well. So hope to see everyone there. And this is going to take place at the Mildred I. Washington Art Gallery, 12:30 to 1:45 p.m. on Thursday, October 19th. And again, thank you to everyone for being part of it. Thank you for people who comment and ask questions. And thank you finally again to Manuel Cuéllar for sharing your work with us tonight. Best of luck on future work. I know you're working on some project. Do you want to mention briefly what your next project is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, being so music obsessed, I think I fell into another music project. It's really about how traditional music from Latin America is changing communities here in the United States, and how they're using that traditional music to battle like day-to-day injustices. So that's going to be hopefully done next year. But yeah, it'll tackle different genres like Son Jarocho, like the one you mentioned, portraying the community here in New York and in the San Diego-Tijuana border, and also Colombian traditional music, bullerengue, who also has like a big music community here in New York.
Wow. Okay, that's I look forward to it myself. I'm excited for that, and hopefully maybe we can view it at Dutchess Community College at some point.
I would love to.
Great,
thank you, Mehmet, for the opportunity, and also everyone watching as well.
Okay, so thank you again. Again, I'm Mehmet Küçüközer, chair of the Hispanic Heritage Month Committee at Dutchess Community College, and again, good night. Thank you. I had a very fun evening, a really rich conversation with Manuel, and so hope to see you everyone at our next events, which are in person. So please come. Hope to see you everyone there. Thank you so much. Good night. Talk to you later, Manuel. To everyone else.